This story has been sent to me by Alex. You will tremble once you hear this story. This is a true story that happened to me and my younger brother, Ethan. My name is Alex, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. We're 3 siblings, and I'm the oldest. I have a younger sister, and my youngest sibling is my brother Ethan. Growing up, our parents were always very strict about letting us go anywhere alone, so our routine was mostly just school and then back home. Even now, we didn't often go out without family. I have always been a huge fan of video games, especially horror games. I used to play them on a VR headset, which made it feel like I was actually inside the game. It was thrilling, and at times, very scary. This story took place on a cold night in December 2021. My cousin was getting married in a small town near Denver, Colorado. My parents, sister, and the rest of the family had already left for the wedding a day earlier, but Ethan and I had decided not to go. My fiancée had gone 2 weeks before the wedding because she was helping with preparations, but I didn't feel like attending due to some personal issues. Day before the wedding, my parents left for Denver with my youngest uncle, who lives in Chicago. Ethan and I thought we'd just stay at home, get our work done, and play some games at night. That evening, my fiancé's father called me and asked why I wasn't attending, mentioning that everyone was wondering where I was. He suggested that I come to the wedding, saying we could talk things out once I arrived. After some convincing, I agreed to go to the wedding the next day. The ceremony was set for the afternoon, and since it was winter, traveling during the day seemed like the best option. We didn't have much time, so we quickly got ready, packed up, and left. At around 11:30 p.m., we locked up the house, checked the car, and set off for Denver. I knew the route pretty well since I had driven there with my fiancé several times before. When we reached the interstate, Ethan insisted on driving, saying I drove too fast. Even though I promised to drive slower, he didn't trust me, so I let him take the wheel. We continued down the highway for a while, and everything seemed fine. A short time later, we saw a car pulled over on the side of the road, and a man was waving for us to stop. We pulled over, and the man told us that due to heavy fog and icy conditions, the highway was closed ahead. He suggested we take a local road that connected to a different route through the mountains. With no other choice, we followed his advice and turned onto the mountain road. The path was narrow and winding, and the dark made it hard to see. We were relying on GPS, but in these remote areas, it wasn't very accurate. After driving for about 3 hours, we had left the city far behind, and there were no other cars in sight. Cold was intense, and visibility was poor due to the thick fog. Around 2:30 a.m., the car suddenly started to stutter and then stopped completely. I got out to check under the hood, thinking the engine might have overheated, even though it was freezing outside. I couldn't understand why this was happening. I told Ethan to stay in the car while I checked. As I was looking at the engine, I suddenly heard faint footsteps coming from the nearby forest. It sounded like someone dragging their feet. Noise got louder, and it felt like someone was getting closer. I thought it could be a wild animal, but the dragging sound felt unsettlingly human. Then woke up, and seeing the look on my face, asked if everything was okay. I didn't want to scare him, so I said the car was just having some trouble, but I'd try to start it again. However, after a few attempts, the car wouldn't start. Meanwhile, our family kept calling to check on us. I told Ethan to answer and let them know we were running late, but didn't mention the car trouble so they wouldn't worry. I told Ethan that I would walk ahead to see if I could find any help, and he should stay in the car with the doors locked, no matter what. I bundled up in my coat and started walking down the road. Cold made it hard to move, and the fog was so thick I could barely see a few feet ahead. As I continued, I heard rustling sounds coming from the woods, as if someone or something was moving through the trees. I began saying prayers quietly to calm myself as I walked. After what felt like forever, there was still no sign of help anywhere. Suddenly, my phone rang, breaking the eerie silence. It was Ethan. He was crying and said that something was hitting the car from different directions, as if trying to get in. My heart started pounding, and I turned around and ran back to the car. It felt like someone was following me, but I didn't look back. When I reached the car, I saw that the passenger door was open, and Ethan was nowhere to be found. I panicked, calling out his name with no response. Then I heard faint whispering coming from the woods, like someone was talking softly. I quickly grabbed a protective charm my mother had given me from the car's glove box and put it around my neck, saying the prayers she had taught me as I walked towards the whispers. Darkness of the forest felt suffocating, and I could sense that something was watching me. The path seemed endless, and the eerie voices got louder. I kept calling for Ethan, but all I could hear was the echo of my voice. Suddenly, I saw a figure standing in the distance. It was Ethan, standing motionless in the middle of the woods, looking terrified. But there was something else beside him, a tall, shadowy figure, about 10 feet tall, covered in thick hair, with eyes glowing bright red. It was floating slightly above the ground and staring straight at me. For a moment, I was frozen with fear. My legs wouldn't move, and my heart was racing. The figure grinned, like it was enjoying my fear. I closed my eyes tightly and recited the prayers even louder, forcing myself to be brave. When I opened my eyes, the creature had disappeared, and Ethan was lying on the ground. I rushed to him, shook him awake, and helped him back to the car. Surprisingly, the car started right away, and we drove off as fast as we could. The rest of the drive felt like a blur. We arrived at the wedding in Denver the next morning, shaken but unharmed. We didn't tell our family what had happened, only saying that we had gotten lost. This experience left a lasting mark on us both. For weeks, we struggled to sleep at night. Even now, whenever I find myself alone in the dark, I remember those glowing eyes and that terrifying grin. It made me believe that this world is not only for humans. There are other beings out there, and sometimes they let us know that they exist. This was the terrifying night Ethan and I will never forget. It taught me that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the strength to push through it, to protect those you love.